John Nichols, one of the smartest guys in the country, the writer for The Nation magazine, author of the new book, Horsemen of the Apocalypse, a field guide.
Trumpocalypse.
Trumpocalypse, you're right. Horsemen of the Trumpocalypse, the field guide to the most dangerous people in America. John, welcome back to the program.
It is a total honor to be with you. And Tom, you're an author of a pile of great books. And so you will know that one of the weird parts is that only when you go on tour do you find the complexities of your books. Mm-hmm. And I found the word Trumpocalypse people struggle with.
Yeah. Well, I think, we tend to read words based on word shape.
Absolutely.
And this is in all caps. Mm-hmm. And studies of readership have shown that when you present people with text in all caps, there's the speed with which they read drops anywhere from 20 to 50%, which is why on contracts, the language that they don't want you to read,
the really bad stuff is in caps.
In all caps, yeah. And they're saying, we're being super transparent. We're doing this. I learned this back when I was teaching advertising and marketing in the 80s. I learned this from a guy who worked for the banking industry. He did advertising and stuff. And he's like, yeah, they say, oh, well, you know, we need to find the most offensive stuff in this contract, the most dangerous stuff, and put it in all caps. And they ask the regulators to ask them. But anyway,
You're not off track
but
at all.
But this is all caps here, so it's hard to read.
Well, don't worry. I have been, I've done quite a few interviews, and last night we were at Politics and Prose, which is the wonderful independent bookstore here in Washington, and it was just a wonderful event. But the guy who was introducing me, he was a great guy, said before, I'm going to get Trumpocalypse right. I'm going to get it right. And then he got up there, and it was like a melange. So I realized that we're going to have to teach the people the word Trumpocalypse. Right. That's okay. I like a little teaching moment.
There you go. A new word for us all. Trumpocalypse. So in this book, you have basically each chapter is devoted to a person. Whether it's you start out with the Mercers, Robert and Rebecca, Steve Bannon, Kellyanne Conway, Steve Miller. Then you get through Mattis and you got a thing on Tillerson in here, Neil Gorsuch, Mike Pence. I mean, it's just. I don't know how many chapters you have, but it looks like there's 42. 40 chapters, so 40 different people. I'm wondering. I mean, we all know the stories about how corrupt Ryan Zinke is, or how bizarre Price was.
Your listeners know that.
Yeah.
To be truthful with you, you'd be stunned by the number of American smart, engaged people that are not aware of how bad some of these people are.
Oh, I know. It's because our media absolutely sucks. It basically they ask, what are the 5 stories that are going to get the most eyeballs? What are the most salacious stories? And they refuse to cover politics as anything other than either sports, who's up, who's down, or soap opera, who's hurt feelings, who's angry. And there's no discussion of the actual issues. What will the impact be?
What I say at events,
legislation.
When I talk about this book, is I say, look, I understand. I've done TV. You've done TV. We've all, been a part of all this. But this is a really serious moment. And so I wrote a book about politics. And I know that's a rare thing. But this is actually about the reality of politics and governance in our country. And it goes way beyond Donald Trump's personality. A year ago, more than a year ago, in February of 2016, I wrote a cover story for The Nation that said, President Trump, it's possible. Like you, early on, I recognized the economic issues and many of the other issues that were in play that were not well discussed by our media. That didn't mean I knew Trump was going to be president, but I understood that this dynamic was in play. And so at that time, I started looking at the people around him. I started trying to understand, who he would empower if he came to power, because I knew he was incapable of governing, just as he was incapable of running a business.
Right.
And so I became very, very interested in those who were in his circle and in his outer circle. What became very clear to me is he didn't know anybody who was going to be good at what they did. He was going to do like on The Apprentice. Folks would come in and audition for them, and if they were the loudest yeller, the flashiest character, he'd give them a position. And so what ended up is rabid ideologues, people who literally are bleary-eyed ideologues, got put in charge of agencies, not in any kind of traditional conservative or Republican tradition.
Oh, he's got a right-wing radio host that he wants to make the head scientist for the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
I'm telling you. Yeah. Well, and the guy who's in charge of agriculture, Sonny Perdue, is corporate agribusiness. At the most extreme. Well, it's a different. But at the most extreme. And then, you look at putting Betsy DeVos in charge of education. If you really were a right-winger, if you're really conservative, you don't like public education, you could find hundreds of people who have served on school boards, served as superintendents of public instruction, have been education professors, have had any credible experience to put in that position. The one person who has only ever been listened to on education because she's rich and because she throws a lot of money around is Betsy DeVos. I opened the book with her hearing. I don't know. I know you follow things closely and your listeners too, but I want to remind people of that hearing. She went before that committee and the senator from New Hampshire, Maggie Hassan, asked her some good, smart questions about programs for kids with disabilities and a host of other aspects of federal law. Really important stuff. Betsy DeVos didn't know. She
didn't know what Title X was.
She didn't know. She didn't know what was federal, what was state. She was completely unprepared. And then Bernie Sanders nailed her. I mean, and he didn't do it to be mean. It was just it was one of the most powerful moments. It's the kind of thing that actually, once upon a time, they made movies about moments like this. She was sitting before the committee, and he said, I just want to say, I don't want to be mean to you or anything like this, but do you think you'd be sitting here if your family hadn't given $200 million to Republican candidates, including people who are here today? And instead of saying, of course I'd be here. I've devoted my life to education. I've served on school boards. I've been a superintendent of instruction. I've taught education. She'd done none of those things. She said, well, I think probably, right? She didn't even say, yes, of course I would be, because she herself knows.
Sure.
It was an absurd choice.
They know this. So the question that I was leading up to,
of course you are,
in pointing out that you've got 40 chapters, 40 different individuals, more or less, that you're profiling. What surprised you? What did you learn? Who did you come across where you said, holy crap, I can't believe this?
There was a ton of it. Much more, we all talk about Scott Pruitt over at EPA, and you've covered him very, very well. And so I won't go into it, but I do have to tell you.
Feel free to go into it.
Well, just the lawlessness of the guy.
Yeah.
I mean, and one of the things that as I was writing the book, I began working on the book last year, but I was finishing the book as these confirmation hearings were going on and as the Senate was voting. And I followed closely what I thought would disqualify Pruitt, which was a lawsuit in Oklahoma to get the records of his office as Attorney General, which would show that he had been, essentially in the pocket of the fossil fuel companies and literally running, what looked an awful lot like a political operation out of his AG's office, a climate denial operation, the whole bit. Well, a couple of days before the Senate vote was to come, a judge ordered the release of the documents. But the Pruitt's office said, well, it's going to take a few days to get all this together. We know we have to follow the law now. We've fought this for years, but we have to follow the law. Mitch McConnell took this thing to the floor of the Senate in the period between when the judge ruled and when the documents were released.
Of course he did.
This is stunning, man. Like if Mr. Smith goes to Washington or something like that, you'd have a moment like that.
Mitch McConnell doing that is weak compared to what he did with Gorsuch.
Or Sessions.
Yeah.
The Gorsuch hearing is another thing I write about a lot in the book. Gorsuch is a career politico, a guy raised and deeply steeped in conservative politics, conservative activism. And he sat before that committee and pretended like, oh, yeah, I think when I was a kid, maybe in preschool, I might have gone out with my mom to knock on doors or something like that. This was a absurdly dishonest performance.
Yep.
And some Democrats really pressed him. There are heroes in the book. Kirsten Gillibrand comes out as a hero because she stood up for civilian control of the military. Al Franken comes out a hero because he prepared for hearings and knew how to ask questions. A number of other people, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders. But too many Democrats, heard things that should have sent every alarm bell off, and they should have just said, we can't do this. And so I write a lot about that. But I will tell you, I got to be honest, the thing that is chapter 35, Mars Incorporated.
Mars, the candy company?
No, the planet.
Okay.
Newt Gingrich and Robert Walker, Trump's space advisors. Trump has...
Really?
Oh, yeah. Trump has space advisors, right? And in fact, he has been appointing people to key positions as regards space. And I've talked to folks at NASA. I've talked to, this book is steeped in talking to down into the trenches people at the State Department and all sorts of other places. Donald Trump has people around him who are, and in fact, he is empowering, who are enthusiastic backers of privatizing outer space.
Right.
Privatizing the moon, privatizing Mars, so that
well, they want to privatize everything here too.
No,
so
but this
is not inconsistent.
Well, this takes us a step further. And so I go back through all of Trump's speeches about this. Look at the people that he has brought into his inner circle, sometimes appointed to positions, sometimes put in advisory roles. Remember, in this book, I look inside his appointed folks, but also on the edges, the money people. And this is what I want to emphasize. They're passionate about the use of planets in space for mineral extraction, for development in other places, the same way they would, the waterfront in Texas or in the Carolinas. Not everybody, but there are people playing in there. Trump himself has expressed interest in this. And here's where it gets really significant. This is the big deal. To do that, they've got to throw out our space treaties. And you hear Donald Trump talking about getting out of Paris. Some of the most successful stuff we did in the 60s and 70s, like, unimaginable when you really think back on it, with the Russians, with the Chinese, with all sorts of other folks. We worked out treaties that said, yeah, we're landing on planets now. We're going into space. Let's make an agreement that some things we will not do. No country can claim a planet. No country can develop a planet for commercial purposes. You can't use it for military purposes.
Right.
If we got those treaties at this point in our history and really promote a privatization of how we go to that next stage of exploring space, we create dangers for humanity that are the stuff of H.G. Wells.
It's amazing stuff. John Nichols, the book is Horsemen of the Trumpocalypse, a field guide to the most dangerous people in America. And some guy wrote, the great threat posed by Donald Trump's presidency does not begin or end with him. Trump's appointees have the power to privatize, to deregulate, and rip apart the American dream. They're already attacking our liberties, our social safety net, and our planet. With his deeply reported and profoundly honest book, John Nichols exposes them all. This is an essential book. Thom Hartmann.
My friend Thom Hartmann. It's probably unfair to have somebody I like as much as you blurbing it, but I do respect you in that regard.
John, thank you so much.
Really honored to be with you.
Good luck with the book. Horsemen of the Trumpocalypse. Check it out.